What is up, guys and gals? It's me, Thomas Fan and One here, and today, well, we're not taking a look at these figures. If you guys have seen the title card of this episode, you guys will know what we're going to talk about. Yes, today we're going to talk about the very first episode of the live-action Avatar TV show that is currently airing on Netflix, which you can go and watch. So, that being said, before we continue, this does contain spoilers for the TV show. So if you're going to watch this and you're going to listen about this, please take note, this does contain spoilers for the first episode at the very least. Some things have been spoiled already by the creators of the Netflix TV show, and certain things have been confirmed by certain other people beforehand, but I don't want to spoil too much, but I'm going to have some spoilers in this episode. So, without further ado, here we go. So, episode 1, basically, it starts out kind of nice with the Airbenders at the Southern Air Temple 100 years ago. We see Monk Gyatso, attending to some sort of garden of that nature. And take note, this scene, like I said, is supposed to take place 100 years, right at the day of the war. They're getting ready for the Great Comet Festival, which is basically Sozin's Comet, but before it was called Sozin's Comet, and everything of the nature. So, firstly, a lot of questions were answered when we watched the very first episode, to an extent for the cartoon of these two, from what these two are based off of. So, the first thing was the siege at the Air Temple. How did the Firebenders get up to how did they get up to the Southern Air Temple? We didn't see any climbing equipment. We didn't see anything of that nature in the cartoon. However, the Netflix creators, or the Netflix TV show creators, kind of took some creative liberties, and basically they used the technique that Ozai used in the cartoon to defeat, or to try and defeat Aang. Excuse me, not to defeat, to try and defeat Aang. So, and that would be, he basically flew. The Firebenders basically had the knowledge to fly. And prior to the Airbender scene, we have basically the Fire Nation prepping for war. And what basically happens is there's a messenger who is from the Earth Kingdom, and he basically has, quote unquote knowledge that they're about to start a war with the Earth Kingdom. Well, they definitely do not do that. They obviously go after the Airbenders, like I said previously. So it was basically a fake out so that the world would prepare for war, but the Airbenders would have no idea until later. So, it's basically just, a small little detail that it can't be forgotten. Now, the rest of the story pretty much kind of takes place kind of like the original cartoon. Well, maybe after the siege of the Airbenders. Basically what happens is we see Aang, get told, basically he's the Avatar, he's got this big weight on his shoulders, he's got this power, and Gyatso tells him, hey, I couldn't imagine anybody else who would be suited to have this power, because you're kind of like the perfect student kind of thing. So basically, that's what we see and hear from Monk Gyatso. And I do like the fact that we get more of him in the beginning of the show. And yes, he does fight for Aang to stay a normal boy until, he is ready to show that he is the Avatar. But the air nomads basically tell him, no, you have to tell him he's the Avatar. Otherwise, this could be a problem. So that they basically just barely get noticed that the Fire Nation is preparing for war, and that leads into what the whole trailer says. The Fire Nation has embarked in a dark path. That whole kind of thing. That takes place right at the beginning of the show, which in context now makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. So, obviously, we see Fire Lord Sozin defeating the Airbenders, but prior to that, Aang obviously gets a little bit in his head. He himself gets himself into his head, so he decides to go out and calm his thoughts down and everything of the nature, right? And what happens prior to this is basically Gyatso tells him, you've always been special, you've always been powerful, you've always been certain things. And Aang says, basically, I've had to control how I've fought, how I've done those powers, basically. Now we come to the storm. Now, he basically goes down in the storm, and at that point, it's kind of like a retelling all the way from Season 1, Episode 1, Boy in the Iceberg. Now, fast forward 100 years, obviously, and, fast forward 100 years, obviously now we're in the Southern Water Tribe, and obviously Fire Lord Sozin did not capture Aang and anything of that nature. So basically all of that kind of just led up to a whole little bit of nothing, but honestly, I'm not going to complain because we didn't get an explanation for what happened, so that was entirely made up with some usage of prior knowledge of a certain episode. So that I'm going to give them a massive pass on for the first part of the episode, which was the Siege of the Southern Air Temple. So I cannot complain there. Now, we go to Wolf Cove, otherwise known as the Southern Water Tribe. Now, the Southern Water Tribe, it is much different than the cartoon. How shall we say? How it goes basically is Katara is still learning how to waterbend, and and in her efforts to do so, basically the whole gist of her is that she goes into the sunken ship that's in the Water Tribe, or the Southern Water Tribe, and there's like this little pool of water that she tries and practices to do waterbending. It's sad, but also kind of entertaining to watch. So that happens, and then we cut to Sokka grilling the young children after Katara has been called back to camp. And trust me when I tell you, it's kind of cringe from here on this point. So basically we see, Sokka grilling the other teenagers, because they are teenagers, not children, not 5 to 6 year olds like they were in the TV show. They are, they are like 13, 14 years old. Sokka's like barely 16. Barely 16. And this is what I don't like about this part of the show, is that he is acting chief of the Water Tribe, which I do and do not understand. I can't get behind it. So then we cut from that to them basically saying, there's not enough fish to go around. So Sokka's basically like, you know what? If you want something done right, you got to go do it yourself. He packs Katara and him back into the canoe, and he basically tells Katara to stop acting like a child and stop playing with the water and stop playing and do more adult things and stuff like that. And then basically the whole thing from that point forward is they get lost. The canoe basically kind of drifts. It doesn't sink like it does in the show. And it sinks, that whole thing, or it doesn't sink, but it floats away a little bit, so it comes back at some point. Which honestly isn't the best part. The worst part about this piece is that they just come up upon the iceberg and it breaks open. That's a little sus to me. In the original cartoon, they did go through some sort of problems, and they did have some sort of argument, and they did go through some sort of rapids, but their canoe sank instead of drifted away, and they did not. And Aang basically woke up right then and there, right after he had, after the iceberg had gotten up, and he had, gone from being Avatar State Aang to regular Aang, waking up, seeing Katara. None of that happens. None of that happens at all. Basically, they just ferry him back over. Don't even notice that there's another thing inside the iceberg that's moving. Take note, it's our boy Appa, who is just, frozen in time. But it's just like, I really wish they would have taken some more consideration to letting Bryan Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino. I really wish they could have just let them have some of their creative differences and left the actual creators' differences alone, enough to a point where they could have just said, you know what, we'll leave it alone and see what happens, but if it doesn't work out with season 1, then we're not going to do a season 2. However, I think they should do a season 2 of this show because I did binge watch the whole thing. But we're not here to talk about the entire show. We're here to talk about episode 1. So the whole thing of that goes on. Zuko obviously sees the Avatar. He obviously has a bone to pick with him, and he obviously has to go to the Southern Water Tribe. Takes him only a couple of minutes to get there. We barely see Appa for a minute. He basically comes in at the last second to say hi to Aang before the Fire Nation shows up, before he shows up. So basically the whole gist of that was then Aang goes and hides in an igloo instead of being banished by Sokka and being, criticized by Gran. So the whole thing of this goes down of like when Aang wakes up, Gran has to tell him his identity, and then she tells him basically the intro to the original TV show, and it's really just like, firstly, how did Gran know that, Aang was the Avatar? How did she know that? And secondly, how on earth did Gran happen to just, know he's an airbender? If he's been extinct for a while, then the airbenders would have definitely not been seen. Unless Gran grew, was living at the Southern Air Temple, seeing them right before that was going down. I mean, I can't for sure say how old she is, so I don't know what goes on. I'm not sure how old Gran is in the TV show, nor do I know how she is in the original TV show. So please somebody tell me down in the comments below, down there somewhere. So basically that's the whole gist of that. Sokka fights Zuko, barely, and obviously he loses completely. Zuko basically just says, "I don't want to hurt you. I just want the Avatar. I just want him." Aang basically kind of gives himself up. I will say this: the guy that they got to play Iroh, fucking awesome, man. And pardon my language on this, but fucking awesome, man. Dude, Iroh is quite possibly the one of the few characters who carries this show. It's Iroh and Zhao, but we don't get to Zhao until the next episode. So they get the Avatar and then they lose him because he escapes due to Aang, gliding off in his glider. He steals Zuko's notebook that has all the Avatar's information and everything of the nature written inside it. So basically Aang isn't going into the fight completely blind or going into anything completely blind, because he does get a vision, but it's not of the events you would think it is. So basically it ends with them landing at the Southern Air Temple, and Zuko very, very upset, still trying to track him a little bit. But Aang then learns of what happens to of the Airbenders and gets really upset, and then we get the flashbacks from the very beginning of the episode where Aang and Gyatso were he basically just went to sleep and woke up and he wasn't there and he died. How could this have happened, kind of thing. And so he goes into the Avatar state for the first time, and he does blow up a portion of the Air Temple. I'm not going to deny that. So, things to be considered of in this TV show is that the Firebenders are portrayed perfectly. There are a lot of elements missing from the original TV show. However, that is to be expected. But a lot of things that I wish they could have toned down a little bit on their creative differences. Just a little bit. I'm saying just a little bit, not a lot. A little bit's just enough. But I'm going to say I will give if I'm to rank these episodes based on a scale out of 1 to 10, I would have to use a set of 3 rules. The first one is, because it's a redo of a cartoon, and any live action version of a cartoon is very difficult to pull off just in itself. And Netflix managed to pull One Piece out of their asses, and somehow the world was like, we want more. And then they came up with Avatar: The Last Airbender and said, hey, this is kind of like our Asian American Game of Thrones. Not my words, it's theirs. It's exactly what they said, not me. So I'm not gonna lie, it is an amazing show, and it is pretty faithful to the original show. So the first rule is, how faithful is it? Well, I think it is pretty faithful. That's the first part. The second part, how is the acting? Well, I think the acting is pretty good. I think Zuko's actor could do a little better, and I think Aang's actor needs to be a little bit more enthusiastic instead of serious. And the third thing that I'm gonna have to rank this on would be, how memorable is this episode going to be? So, Mark, checking off almost all three, being the first one, how faithful is it to the original adaptation of the episode? I think it's just, I think I think they followed a loose narrative using their own creative differences from the beginning to basically say, hey, this is how we're going to introduce you to our version of Avatar. You should enjoy this. And I think it takes those creative differences to a very good degree on this particular episode, on episode 1. I do believe that they get a 7 to 7.4 out of 10. Now, what gets a perfect 10? Well, a perfect 10 meets all of the criteria that I would say. Or that meets all of those criteria. How faithful is it to the adaptation, how good is the acting, and how memorable is the episode. So, I have to say it's not extremely faithful to the original episode, but I will say it is pretty darn faithful to the original episode. Acting is pretty darn good. There are a couple that I do wish could do a little better. I think Katara's actress could have done a little better, and I think Zuko's actor could have done a little bit better in terms of what was needed for this particular episode. So I think that could have been done, and I think Aang's actor needs to be a little more childish and a little more enthusiastic about his role. And other than that, I think the entire cast was pretty much cast out perfectly. I mean, Sokka's character was perfectly done. We had Grand's character perfectly done. If I'm gonna have to rank Gyatso, I mean, Gyatso's character was pretty good. I mean, it's the kind of thing that Aang described in the TV show, is that he was kind of fatherly to him, and he was. So that I can understand. And so taking some of the creative differences, using some of the the visions in the past references, I can accept that. So, like I said, 7 to 7.4 out of 10. So, anywho, this is Thomas Fan 1 saying, don't forget to subscribe for more content. Don't forget to leave a like on this video. Don't forget to check out Planet Toys, a world built by collectors, where if you sign up today with them, you can get yourself an extra 10% off your first order if you would like. And please do not forget to check out Optination Reviews, Beastman Reviews, Riveted Reviews, Patrick with a Y, Jordy's Rail Videos, iStar552, Nth Doctor 10, and Take Along Productions. I know they all do some amazing work, along with Bravely G. I don't know if I said Bravely GG or not. Please forgive me. I had to take a very, very short breath for that. Anywho, this is Thomas Fan 1 saying, don't forget to keep playing with your toys and keep watching your TV shows. Don't forget it.